Hi, my name's Glenn Bell. I'm with Clear Messages and welcome to this presentation on how to draw more effective diagrams for business purposes. I'll be giving the presentation in the Pachaka format. So I have 20 slides and each slide gets 20 seconds. So all up, the presentation goes for 6 minutes and 40 seconds. So let's get started. And I'd like to kick off with an example of a typically poorly drawn diagram. It was done by a multinational consulting firm for a large government department. And it represents the type of diagrams that we frequently see in a business setting where very little thought has been put into making it a clear message. So the diagram is one of a Gantt chart, and you're immediately drawn to how ugly it is. You're wondering, why are there all these grid lines everywhere? Why are the rows different heights? Why is there that strange pink colour? And so your emotional reaction is one of ugliness, and you're probably not going to take on board the messages that diagram's trying to communicate. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about 4 principles based on research from the Gestalt school, which began in Germany in 1912, and it looked at how human beings absorb and group information together. And so we'll apply these principles to our business diagrams. First principle is the principle of proximity, and when you look at this diagram, you'll immediately see the circles as grouped into 3 separate groupings, and you do that because the circles are closer together. And you can't help yourself from doing this. You're sort of hardwired to do it. You do it automatically without even thinking. That means that when you're drawing a diagram, if you're going to separate things out in terms of space, there needs to be a reason. So in the example that we've got here, ship order is much further away from receive order and pack order, and it needs to have a reason for doing it. It can't just be whimsical or being incomplete. It needs to have a purpose. The principle of similarity means that your eye is immediately starting to group the shapes that you see there based on them being similar colours or size or have a similar fill within them. And so, once again, you can't help yourself from doing it. It's just a natural reaction. That means that when you're drawing a diagram for business purposes, if you're going to make something a different shape or colour, it needs to have a purpose. So if ship order is going to be a different shape or colour, then there needs to be a reason for why we're highlighting that. Otherwise, it's just distracting to the reader. This example here uses the principle of proximity. So we have our 2 circles, and you're immediately grouping them into 2 horizontal circles because that's how they're shaped, that's how they're positioned, they're closer together. And so that grouping seems natural, and you sort of wonder to yourself, how could it ever be broken? But the principle of connectedness, that's our 3rd Gestalt principle, overrules the principle of proximity. So immediately those lines appeared, suddenly you went from 2 horizontal circles to 2 vertical circles, two groups of vertical circles, regardless of the fact that they're spatially further apart. And we'll see that can be quite powerful to us. Here's an example of the principle of similarity. So the 4 circles are pretty much close together, the same distance. The difference, though, is that 2 of them are yellow and 2 of them are green, and so we group them that way into 2 vertical groupings of the circles, and you do that effortlessly and you can't help yourself. Then when we introduce the principle of connectedness with the 2 lines, the groupings again flick around, and so now we see them as 2 horizontal groups, and even though one's a yellow circle and one's a green circle, that doesn't matter anymore. It's the fact that the lines are connecting them, and that's how we're going to connect. This can be quite useful to us, so I was trying to draw a hierarchy of concepts here, and my problem was that diagram and pyramid were spatially further apart than the next level down, which was vertical and horizontal. And this was a limitation just with a piece of paper and the types of shapes that I wanted to put on it. Fortunately, I could resolve this problem by using the principle of connectedness. So even though I was violating the principle of proximity, connectedness came and saved the day and made it so that I can clearly express the types of groupings that I wanted my readers to take on board, to understand that I was trying to highlight that there's a group of concepts around diagrams and there's this group of concepts around pyramids. The 4th and final principle that I want to speak about today is the principle of enclosure. And so once again, your eye is immediately grouping the circles together based on whether or not they're inside a box or inside that shaded ellipse. you just do that straight away, and even though there are two circles connected by a line, it's the circle within the boxes that are together. So let's reapply that principle of enclosure to our earlier example. So here we've got shapes that have been grouped based on the principle of similarity. We're putting the green circles with the yellow circles, and we can't see it any other way. That seems the most natural way. And then the principle of connectedness comes through and highlights a different way of grouping and overrules what was being done with the principle of similarity. So now we're seeing two horizontal groupings, regardless of the fact that they're different colours. And we think, well, can't be any other way, can it? But then a box comes along, and through the principle of enclosure, we now see the green circles as being part of a definite group, and there's no ambiguity there. Whilst there may be some associations with the yellow circles, primarily is that the green circles are in the same group. And so that's something important when we're applying that to our diagrams. So here we've got this dotted box that is grouping receive order and pack order together, and you'll note that that's been labelled as pre-shipping activities. So we're using enclosure there to group those together, and we've got a reason for it, and it's quite powerful. And then ship order is another activity that happens outside of the pre-shipping activities. Returning to our Gantt chart, we can now see what the problems are. The principle of enclosure with all those grid lines is throwing our brain into a frenzy because we've got all these irrelevant groupings happening. And the principle of similarity with the different sizes for the rows is also confusing, as is the use of the pink for no apparent reason or over the top. So finally, we redraw the diagram, we get rid of the grid lines, we get rid of the confusing use of colours, and we can now introduce some extra information such as the faint red line that shows where we were up to on the Gantt chart. And so now we've got a clean, crisp, unambiguous message to give to our readers using the Gestalt principles. So thanks for that. That's the end of the Pachaka presentation. If you're interested in more information, please visit the Clear Messages website. There's an option there to also to be able to contact us. And happy diagramming, and hopefully you'll be able to use the Gestalt principles that we've done so far in your everyday life.